found out that I spent the night with the man from the club and then took his revenge.
Life is unpredictable, my whole world is crushing down before me and I don't know what to do. Everything still feels like a dream. I wish I never went to the club on that fateful day. I've never been the type to go clubbing in the first place. A single night out with my friends is about to ruin my life. I messed up big time and I can only hope that things don't end up getting worse than it already is. I'm in a state of fiasco right now. I can't believe I cheated on my fiancé with a total stranger. How do I come out of this? A night of fun is about to cause me my whole world. My name is Nadia and I'm a 26-year-old TV presenter. I live in a small town called Madison in Georgia. I'm engaged to my fiancé, his name is George. He is an architect. George and I have been engaged for 2 years and our wedding is in 2 weeks. I met George 5 years ago when I went to New York for an audition. It was love at first sight. Ever since then we have been inseparable. George is the absolute love of my life. He has all the qualities I ever wanted in a man. He is every woman's dream. The more I think about it, the more I blame myself for everything. I don't think George will ever forgive me for cheating on him 2 weeks before our wedding. I hate myself for doing this to him. He doesn't deserve this. George and I promised each other we would be celibate until our wedding night, and now I have ruined everything. I don't think I will be able to look him in the face and tell him the truth. I don't know how he's going to react. He might even break off the engagement and cancel the wedding. That will be disastrous. How will I be able to confess to George that I slept with a total stranger at a club? I wish I never followed my friends to the club that night. I can still remember everything that happened that night. My friends organized a party for me at a club and invited me. Initially, I wanted to decline the invitation, but I decided to go after I saw how much effort they had put into planning the party. The party was going smoothly until I decided to have a drink. That was the beginning of my nightmare. While we were dancing and having fun, a tall handsome man approached me and requested I dance with him. I was reluctant at first, but my friends encouraged me. According to them I should loosen up and have fun because after marriage I wouldn't have such freedom anymore. I wish I never listened to them, but I did. The man introduced himself as Jaden. Our conversation began from there. I enjoyed his company because he made me laugh so hard. I don't think I have laughed so hard like that in a long time. Don't get me wrong, I love my fiancé George, but sometimes he can be too serious. Jaden and I continued our conversation. The conversation was going so smoothly that I didn't want it to end. That was the only thing I can remember. The next day I woke up to see myself in a strange place, on a strange bed and with a complete stranger. I was so devastated, and was in denial for the first 5 minutes. I needed time to process everything. I could not bring myself to accept the fact that I jumped in bed with a stranger I just met less than 24 hours ago. It didn't make sense. I've been celibate ever since I met George 5 years ago. How then did I let my guard down to sleep with a stranger I met a few hours ago? George doesn't know what has happened yet. He has been out of town for work and will be back tomorrow. I don't know what to do now. Should I confess everything to George or I should keep this secret with me forever? My wedding is coming up in a few weeks and I don't know what might happen if I confess to George the first cheated on him. I don't want to lose George. I love him so much that the thought of him breaking up our engagement and calling off the wedding is killing me. I don't think I can survive without George in my life. What should I do, guys? Should I confess to George or pretend like nothing happened? Update. Hi guys, it's me again. I didn't confess to George, at least not yet. I decided to bury the truth with me forever. I can't risk losing George. I can't even imagine my life without George. I decided to move on like nothing happened. Everything was going fine until Jaden contacted me. I didn't pick the call because I didn't have his contact on my phone. I gave him my contact at the party I guessed. After several calls, I decided to pick the call and he introduced himself. I immediately ended the call, so he sent me a text. He said he has been looking for me and that he has something for me. I can't even believe the fool still had the audacity to contact me after everything. Even though I have a part to play in everything that happened, I'm sure he took advantage of me because I was tipsy. I blocked his line immediately and continued with my day. I regret going to the club that day. If I had stayed at home that day, I never would have met Jaden. What happened could have been averted. But it is too late to apportion blame now. I just had to concentrate on what was important, which was my upcoming wedding with George. Everything was going as planned until 2 weeks later. I noticed my engagement ring was missing. That was the beginning of another problem for me. I was dressed ready to meet George for our wedding rehearsal when I noticed I could no longer find my engagement ring. There is no way I will meet with George and he will not notice my engagement ring is missing. I have never removed my engagement ring ever since George proposed to me 2 years ago. There is no way I'm going to miss my own wedding rehearsal, but I can't go there without my engagement ring. I turned my entire house upside down looking for the ring, yet I couldn't find it. George was calling on the phone, everyone was worried. After searching my house and not finding the ring, I knew where I might have left it. Your guess is as good as mine. I forgot the ring at Jaden's place. I unblocked him and called him immediately. He told me he's been expecting my call, that he is with my ring and I should come to his house and get it. I asked him if we could meet in an open place, but he insisted we meet in his house. I didn't have an option. I wanted my ring back, so I went to his house. I slept with Jaden again, guys. Don't judge me, please. There's something about Jaden that is irresistible. Jaden and I made out for the second time. This time I was not tipsy and it was 2 days to my wedding. I couldn't believe what had happened. Everything happened so fast. There's this undeniable sensation between Jaden and I. I took my engagement ring from Jaden and I warned him never to contact me again, that I was getting married in 2 days. Jaden fell on his knees and started begging. He asked me to give us a chance and I told him there is no us to begin with. He locked the door and blocked me from stepping out and I threatened to shout. He got scared and moved out the way. I was already late for my wedding rehearsal. Everyone was worried sick because they could not reach me. My phone battery died on my way to Jaden's place. By the time I arrived at the venue for the wedding rehearsal, it was already late. Most people had gone. I only met George and some of his friends around. George was angry, but he took me aside to inquire what happened. I didn't know what to say, so I lied. I told him my grandma met with an accident and I took her to the hospital. That calmed him down a little. He asked we go see her after the rehearsal, but I told him there was no need because it was a minor accident. She is fine and recovering at home. All through the rehearsals, George kept staring at me, like he knew I was trying to hide something from him. He kept asking me if I was okay, all through the rehearsals. He suggested we postpone the rehearsals since I was not in the right frame of mind, but I insisted we continue. If there's one thing I know, it is the fact that I don't have enough time. The more I looked at George, the more I felt guilty. How do I explain to him I cheated on him twice with a stranger? A stranger I don't even know anything about. I don't even know his surname. George kept trying to cheer me up all through the rehearsals. He thought my grandma's accident ruined my mood, so he tried everything within his power to cheer me up. I had to play along because I knew George is very smart. The more he tried to cheer me up, the more sad I became. He doesn't deserve this, not from me, not from anyone. I hate myself right now. I can't believe I made the same mistake twice. The rehearsals were over and George drove me home. The ride home was longer than usual. I don't know if it was the silence in the car or the cold. Whatever it is, I know I might get caught soon if I don't do something. George dropped me at home without saying a word, which was unlike him. He didn't even respond when I asked him if we would be seeing each other the following day. He just drove off without saying anything. I think he is beginning to suspect me. I know I can't fool him for long. Should I confess to him I cheated on him twice with a stranger I met at a club? What if he ends our relationship and never forgives me? I can't allow that to happen. I will do everything possible to make sure George doesn't find out about my affairs. The following day I got a message from George asking me to meet him at our favorite coffee shop. I was so scared because I didn't know why he wanted to see me 24 hours before our wedding. So many thoughts were flying through my mind. I wanted to ask the reason for the sudden meetup, but I know he would suspect something fishy if I did that. I was nervous, you could tell by just looking at me. I decided to face my fears and confront my demons once and for all. I got up, dressed up, and headed for the coffee shop. My legs were shaking. I thought they would break before I got to George. I was so lost in thought that I didn't know when we arrived at the coffee shop, the taxi driver had to tap me for me to come back to my senses. I got down and I could see George was already there waiting for me, which made me more anxious. We were supposed to meet by 9 o'clock and George was already seated there by 8 o'clock. I arrived earlier than scheduled because I wanted to calm myself down before the meeting. All of a sudden, fear gripped me and I didn't want to step an inch inside anymore because it was obvious George already knows the truth and he is about to call off the engagement and cancel the wedding. It took the last strength in me for me to finally step inside. I guess you never know how strong you are until being strong is the only option you have. Well, can you guys guess what happened next? Sorry to burst your bubble, guys, George didn't invite me over to break off the engagement, at least not yet. But I wish I never went in the first place because nothing prepared me for what happened next. After I arrived at the coffee shop, I met with George and he apologized for the way he behaved with me the day before. He told me he was mad. I showed up 5 hours late to our wedding rehearsals and that was why he ignored me. He apologized for being insensitive and asked me to forgive him. Guys, I died. How could he ask me to forgive him when I'm the one who should be asking for his forgiveness? How would he react when he finds out my grandma was never sick and that I was making out with a stranger? That was why I came late to our wedding rehearsal. I felt bad and hated myself even more. At that moment, I wanted to confess everything to him, but I could not. I can't risk losing him forever, so I said I have accepted his apology and I also apologized for not informing him about my grandma's alleged accident on time. One dangerous thing about telling a lie is, you need a lie to cover a lie. Once you start telling lies, there's no going back. I never knew a day would come when I would keep anything from my best friend. We always told each other everything. I know everything about George, even the little things. I know of his favorite shaving stick even down to his favorite hairbrush. We tell each other everything. We gist about how our day went every night before bed. George always calls me to tell me good night every day since we met 5 years ago. He has been consistent that I wonder how he makes out time from his busy schedule. George makes sure we talk at least 3 times daily. George was always out of town because of the nature of his job and that's why he made sure we communicated at least 3 times daily. The reason our relationship survived my challenges was because of communication. We communicated our feelings to each other. That's why it hurts me that I can't discuss my cheating with him. That would mean losing him forever. George is soft-hearted but he is also a principled man. I've witnessed a situation where he sacked his cook because he lied to him about the cost of groceries. I knew he would never forgive me if he found out I cheated on him with a complete stranger. The worst aspect is that I was the one that suggested we stay celibate until our wedding night. We made a promise to stay faithful to each till we say I do. George will never forgive me, that I'm sure of. He will think I tricked him. George has been faithful to me ever since we started dating. He was a bad boy, well, not really, but he has the look. Ladies always flocked around him, but all that changed when we started dating. He blocked all of them when he saw how uncomfortable I was. He can do anything just to put a smile on my face, but here I was hiding a very big secret from him. I was playing how everything can go wrong in my head. When George interrupted me, he held my hands and asked me if there's anything I should tell him. I was confused. I pretended to be lost and asked him what he meant by that. He told me we are about to get married and we should start our new chapter on a clean slate, that if there's anything I want to tell him I shouldn't hesitate. That was my chance, guys, my chance to confess everything and finally be free from the guilt that is ruining what ought to be the best time of my life. But I was too scared to come clean. I told him there's nothing of sort, that I have always been open to him ever since we started dating. There I was telling more lies. I threw the question back to him and he said yes, he has something he wanted to confess to me and that I should swear I will forgive him. Guys, in that moment I had some comfort. I could breathe again. I thought he was about to confess he cheated on him, not that I will be happy he cheated, but at least we will be even. I asked him to go ahead and promise to forgive him. He told me there was a time he lied to me about being at home, but the truth is, he was out with some of his friends, so I should please forgive him. I was disappointed. Everything was written all over my face. At that moment, I wished he cheated on me so we will be even, but that's not the case. I can't believe he will apologize for telling lies. I mean, everybody lies, maybe not everybody, but why is he even apologizing for that? Why now? He is trying to make me feel guilty. Is there a puzzle I'm missing? Does he know something? All these were the questions flying in my head, but I could not voice them out. I told him I had forgiven him and we hugged. He brought out a customized diamond necklace and gave it to me. He told me he couldn't wait for us to finally get married tomorrow. George love language, he loves giving me expensive things. Everything was going smoothly until my worst nightmare finally happened. While George was helping me wear the necklace, I decided to look in the mirror and see how the necklace looked on me, and couldn't believe my eyes. Is that not Jaden I'm seeing sitting on the next table to ours? I was shocked. He was smiling at me, so I quickly dropped the mirror and face front. I told George the first was no longer comfortable in that coffee shop and that we should go to another place. He was surprised because that was our favorite spot. He asked me to exercise a little patience so he could finish his hot dog and coffee. But he stopped eating when he saw how uncomfortable I was. He asked me to give him a minute so he could rush to the restroom so we could go. Immediately he stepped out to go use the restroom. Jaden left his table and came to where I was staying. I was too scared to remember anything he was saying. I kept asking him to leave, but he refused. While we were at it, George arrived and asked why Jaden was in his seat. I have to come up with an excuse to save the day. I told George, Jaden was my schoolmate and he only came to say hi to me. I introduced George to Jaden as my fiancé. Jaden got the message and left immediately. George was not convinced by that lie, he is too smart to buy that kind of lie. We left the coffee shop and headed home. Before dropping me at home, George held my hands again and looked into my eyes, this time more serious. He asked me if I'm keeping anything away from him and I told him no. He dropped me off at the house and wanted to come say hello, but I refused because he might discover I lied about my grandma having an accident. How long can I keep up with the lies though? Anyways, I'm getting married in 10 hours time. I will worry about the consequences of my actions later. I just wanted to live in the present. But one thing I was sure of is that George is beginning to suspect me. Update. It is finally my wedding day, guys. Yes, my wedding day. The day that was supposed to be the happiest day of my life turned out to be the worst day of my entire life. The day I always fantasized about got ruined. I don't even know where to start from. So I got up that morning excited that I was about to tie the knot, not knowing I was about to be humiliated. I didn't know I was about to be mocked by my enemies. Everything happened so fast, it felt like a dream. I woke up that day earlier than usual. I was excited, so you could tell by just looking at me. I was so happy to finally be getting married. I couldn't wait for the wedding ceremony to be over, so George and I would start our journey together. I hurriedly took my bath and my makeup artist started putting makeup on my face. George called me on the phone and asked if I was prepared, and I told him yes, I'm fully prepared to get married. He sounded weird, but I was too excited to bother myself about that. I mean, what could go wrong again? George and I will be getting married in 2 hours. Nothing can go wrong in just a short time, so I thought, but I was wrong. Everything could go wrong in a twinkle of an eye. Your entire life can change in just a moment. That's what happened to me. After my phone call with George, the first was even more excited than I was before. George told me on the phone he had a surprise for me. I was so eager to get married, I almost told my makeup to stop the makeup. I was eager to get married. I asked my makeup artist to hurry so we will be done on time because I will not be going late to my own wedding. Everything was going so smoothly, I almost forgot that I cheated on George. George called me back. He said he wanted to check if everything was in order. I told him everything was perfect. I mean, we hired the best wedding planner in town. He asked me if I have ever done something stupid before. The question was strange. I told him no, and he was quiet for some time. I asked if he was having a second thought about us getting married or if he was getting cold feet. He assured me everything was fine and that he was only teasing me. I wish I had read the sign. He asked me if I was nervous and I told him no. How can I be nervous when I'm about to get married to my best friend? If anything, I was excited because I knew I made the right choice. I picked the perfect man to be the father of my unborn kids. But deep down I was worried. I wanted to know why George sounded off on the phone. The more I thought about it, the more restless I became. I can't afford to lose George, the thought alone makes my heart arch. I finally left for church, guys. On my way to church, George kept calling. He said he wanted to make sure I arrived safely. I asked where was, and he told me he was already at the church. He told me he couldn't wait to see me. I became a little relaxed after the call, but I was still anxious. I wanted everything to be over so I could breathe. I got to the church and got the biggest surprise of my life. I know you guys are eager to know what happened next. Well, here we go. George never showed up to our wedding. George dished me on the altar. Everything happened so fast it still feels like a dream. What I have feared the most has happened to me. George did not just cancel the wedding, he made sure he gave me a public embarrassment. How do I face everyone and tell them the wedding has been canceled? At that moment it felt like I had lost everything. At first I thought he was stuck up in traffic or something happened to him on his way to our wedding. I decided to try his line, but he refused to pick up. I was even more worried because we spoke few minutes ago and he assured me he was already at the venue. The priest that was supposed to officiate our wedding was surprised to see me. Apparently George had called the priest to inform him that the wedding was cancelled. I couldn't believe my ears. If not that he was a priest, I would have called him a pretty liar. All the guests were present except for George's family and friends, which was shocking. I couldn't even look at my dad. I could tell he was disappointed. If there's one person that was genuinely happy that I was getting married, it was my dad. We have always planned this ever since I was a child. He always dreamt about walking me down the aisle. I could tell he was not happy. I felt bad for my dad. His dream of walking his only child down the aisle was cut short. Everyone felt sorry for me. I felt bad for them too. I blamed myself for wasting everybody's time. I continued calling George till he finally picked up. I asked his whereabouts and he warned me to stop calling him. I was shocked because he has never spoken to me in that manner before. He asked if I liked my surprise. It was then I realized he had planned everything. He told me he is aware of everything and that he can't get married to cheat like me and that he regretted the day he ever set eyes on me. He told me there would be no wedding. He called me so many unprinted names. I begged him to come back for us to at least get married and after the wedding we can fix everything. He can even cheat back if that is what he wants and we'll be even. I begged him, but he refused to listen. He told me things don't work that way. He told me he knows everything I have done so far, how I got in bed with a total stranger I met at a club and how I have been telling more lies to cover up. How I went to visit him on the night of our wedding rehearsals and still slept with him again. He told me I should get lost and never contact him again. He told me he was going to ruin my life and that dishing me on our wedding day was just one out many to come. Everything felt like a dream and I had to pinch myself to make sure I was not dreaming. My worst fears finally came to pass, guys. George didn't not just break off the engagement, he never showed at the altar. The humiliation was too much. Everyone present looked at me with pity and tried to console me. I bet they would hate me if they finally found out the truth of what happened. I knew my life was ruined forever. It was foolish of me to think I could get away with cheating. What was I thinking in the first place? I ran out of the church as fast as my legs could carry me and headed straight to George Place. I was denied entrance by the security. I had to go back home. I tried calling George several times, but he never picked up my calls. It was later in the day the reality of everything that had happened hit me. I cried so much it felt like my eyes would pop out. I can't believe I ruined my own life. I have lost George, my best friend, forever. The following day, the news was all over town. My cancelled wedding had become a hot gossip in the town. One thing I was thankful for was the fact that no one knew why George never showed up at our wedding yet. My life will be ruined if people get to know the reason my wedding never happened. George showed up at my house the next day and asked that I return everything he had ever bought for me, from the phone down to the smallest thing like a hairpin. He took it all. I decided to use the opportunity and apologize, but he refused to listen. I wanted to tell him what happened, but he paid deaf ears to everything I was saying. He took everything from me and gave them to my stepmom and half-sister. I was surprised because George and my stepmom had never gotten along. If for anything he hated my stepmom because of how my stepmom treats me, so why is he giving them everything he seized from me? Nothing made sense anymore. Apparently, it was my stepmom and half-sister that exposed everything to George. They overheard me when I was discussing everything that happened with my friend. They recorded it and sent it to George. I don't even blame them, I blame myself. If I had not gone to the club that night, everything that happened would have been avoided and I would be married to George by now. It's too late to feel sorry for myself now, so I decided to go see George one more time to apologize. This time he allowed me in. Nothing prepared me for the surprise that was waiting for me. I came into the house and met George and his ex-girlfriend. For a moment I thought we were still together and I flared up, but he called me to order. He told me I didn't have the right to question him as we are more together. That I lost that right the day I slept with a stranger and lied to him about it. I was hurt, but I remained calm. The interesting part is that they're married. Yes, married. Apparently, while I was walking down the aisle waiting for George, he decided to wed his ex-girlfriend the same day. The shock was too much for me, that I fainted. I woke up to see myself at the hospital. I thought I would see George by my side, but he was nowhere to be found. He didn't even bring me to the hospital. He asked the security to take me to the hospital and he called my dad to inform him I fainted. He never showed up till I was discharged from the hospital. If someone had told me this would happen to me, I would have bet with everything I have that it was not possible. I thought things like this happened in movies. Now my life is like a movie. I never in a million years thought I would cheat on my fiancé with a complete stranger and he would get revenge by leaving me at the altar and getting married to his ex-girlfriend the same day. I doubt I will ever recover from this. I know I was wrong to have cheated on George, but I didn't deserve the public humiliation he gave me. He has practically ruined my life. How do I face the world again? I have lost my self-confidence. Update. Hi guys, I'm back again. Life has been tough. I never imagined my life would turn out this way. I still blame myself every day for cheating on George. I still wish I never went to the club that night. I wish I had declined my friend's invitation to the party. I'm trying to pick up my life again. Slowly everyone seems to be forgetting everything that happened, but not me. Everything is still fresh in my heart. I have continued to blame myself. There's no day I don't cry myself to sleep. Crying has become my favorite thing to do. I would be married to George right now if I had not gone to that party. I decided to move, but it wasn't easy. The more I tried, the harder it became. Madison, Georgia is a small town and news travels fast like wildfire. I couldn't even step out of the house because anyway I went, there were 2 or 3 people gossiping about me. They made the gossip so loud I could hear them. As if the news of my wedding being cancelled was not enough, my stepmom and half-sister decided to spread the news of me sleeping with a stranger a few weeks before my wedding. It got so bad I couldn't even step out of my room. While people were gossiping about me outside, my stepmom and half-sister were on a roll call at home. They took turns to taunt me. I finally decided to relocate from Madison, Georgia and go start life all over again, a place where no one knew me, and that was the best decision I made. I left Madison, Georgia and I moved to Paris. I just wanted to breathe some fresh air. Life in Paris was not easy. It was hard for me to adapt to life there. I grew up in a small town. All my life I was used to a simple life, so it was hard for me to get used to the fast life Paris threw at me. I'm happy I finally summoned the courage to leave my comfort zone. Slowly, I started getting used to life in Paris and I started settling in. I got a house and furnished it to my taste, and I also landed a job at a multi-million company in Paris. Everything seemed to be going well, but I was still not happy. I still felt incomplete. Don't get me wrong, George was my best friend for 5 years, but it was as if I had known him my entire life. That is why it was hard for me to pick up my life again. My life seems to be meaningless without. As time passed, I started smiling again. I started gaining my confidence back. A breakoff shouldn't be the end of the world for me. I still regret everything that happened, but I don't feel bad anymore. It took a lot of therapy sessions for me to be in this present state of mind. Initially, I was reluctant about going for therapy. I thought it was a complete waste of time, but now I'm happy I did. I'm no longer a damaged person, at least not 100%. I can see a lot of improvement in myself. There was no point wishing on what could have been or feeling sorry for myself. I finally accepted that there was no way George and I would get back together. George is married to his ex-girlfriend now. George didn't leave room for reconciliation, that was why he quickly got married to his ex-girlfriend. I had to stop dreaming about us ever coming back together and just face my life. It took lots of work and therapy sessions for me to come out of what happened. I had to make a conscious effort to forget about George, I had to stop waiting for his calls, I had to stop stalking him on social media, and I had to block him for my own sanity. I deleted all the pictures we took together and got rid of everything that reminded me of him. Most importantly, I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I told myself what had happened, and there was nothing I could do about that. That's my story, guys. I hope everyone learns from it. You can't eat your cake and have it. I hope everyone learns a thing or two from my story. Even though I have forgiven myself for everything that happened, I can't seem to forget. I know time will heal everything. Thanks and good. I vowed that nothing will ever take me back to my estranged husband. I never wanted to have anything to do with him. I don't even want to breathe the same air with him. I didn't even want to set my eyes on him. I hated everything about him. My estranged husband is the perfect definition of a wolf in sheep's clothing. I left my husband while he was sick and took our daughter. Yes, I did it and I don't have any regrets. But before you judge me, please listen to my story. Hi guys, my name is Samantha and I'm a 31-year-old baker. Well, I just started a bakery recently. I couldn't really bake before, but that story is not necessary. I'm married to my estranged husband Dennis. We got married 11 years ago, but we have been separated for 5 years now. We have a 10-year-old daughter, her name is Elizabeth, she is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Elizabeth is my whole world, she is the reason I still have the will to live, I want to give her the best. I don't want her to suffer the way I suffered as a child, that's why I will go to any length to give everything. I can give her my whole life without thinking about it. My daughter and I suffered so much in the hands of Dennis. My marriage to Dennis was a total disaster. Dennis and I got married when I was 20 years old. My father sold me off to Dennis because he couldn't pay the debt he owed him. Dennis is a businessman and so is my father. They did a business deal together and it went bad, so my dad married me off to Dennis, or rather he sold me off to him, in exchange his debt was cleared. After the marriage or the business transaction, Dennis made my life a living hell. Dennis and my dad made me sign and document that I was never going to get divorced no matter what. Don't blame me, I was naive and I didn't even know the gravity of what I was doing. When Dennis made the offer to my dad, initially, he refused, but my stepmom convinced him to accept the offer so they will be debt-free. I was so stupid that I didn't know that Dennis had used our ignorance to his advantage. Things like that only happened in movies. How could it be possible that someone would trap another person into a divorce and there'll be no way to get out of it? I know you all are shaking your head and laughing at the possibility of that. Trust me when I say that when I think about it now, I laugh too. I laugh at how funny it sounds. I believed that I was stuck in a bad marriage forever and there was nothing I could do about it. Unknown to me that I was actually wasting time and deceiving myself. Dennis was very smart and he used that to his advantage in the marriage. He saw a family that didn't make sense and then he decided to use that to his own silly game's advantage. I lost my mom when I was 2 years old, so my dad remarried. After their wedding, my stepmom made sure I experienced hell on earth. She hated me for reasons best known to her. My dad was not always around, that's why he remarried. I was very close to my dad, but he remarried, all of that changed. He became distant because my stepmom always quarreled with my dad anytime she saw us together. She never wanted to see me talk to my dad. If she ever caught me talking to my dad, I would be in trouble. She would punish me by not giving me food. This made me scared. I was afraid of going to my dad and he was afraid of coming to me because he didn't want to upset his new wife. She controlled everything, even down to my dad's finances. She was the one that squandered all my dad's business money. She wears the most expensive and trending outfit. That was why my dad was in debt. She mismanaged my dad's fiancé and I became the sacrificial lamb. Things became worse when she gave birth to my stepsister Alora. I was completely neglected by my dad. Alora became my dad's favorite. Growing up, Alora got the best of everything, while I got the one she abandoned. My stepmom never bought anything for me. I always got what Alora rejected. I grew up without the love of a father and mother. So don't be surprised when my dad agreed to me off to his business partner. After the wedding, reality set in. My marriage to Dennis was just like being in bondage. He treated me like a maid. I wasn't allowed into his room. He would ask me to go upstairs anytime his friends visited. He wasn't proud of me. He never allowed me to go out with him. He was ashamed of me, I guess. He had maids before we got married, but immediately after our marriage, he sacked them. I became the official maid. I was sweeping and mopping a big house with a lot of rooms. He also made sure I washed his cars every morning. After that, I prepared his food. He made sure I was occupied with work 24/7. I was so engaged with house chores that I didn't even have time to feel sorry for myself. I cried to bed every day. I thought marriage was like a bed of roses like I read in novels. Nothing prepared me for what I went through in the hands of Dennis. He never took care of me. He didn't buy new clothes or shoes. He told me I didn't need any of that because I was always at home. He never spent a dime on me. I was always sad. The more I tried to get his love and affection, the more he hated me. I was married but very lonely. Every weekend was always tough for me. Dennis would invite his friends over. They would party all weekend. They would drink, smoke, and litter the floor. I would be cleaning after them because Dennis would beat me if he found stains on his tiles or floor. Dennis has about 3 washing machines, but he made me wash with my bare hands. He frustrated me every chance I got. Dennis was a rich man. He had people doing all this for him before I came, but he sacked them immediately I came. That is why I don't regret leaving him while he was sick and taking our daughter with me. I was tired of the marriage even before it began. Dennis made sure I didn't have any money. He would send the gatekeeper out for grocery shopping. He never allowed me to do it. Maybe he was because he was scared of me taking his money and running away. One day I got tired of everything and I decided to run back to my dad's house. Unfortunately for me, my dad was not around. My stepmom chased me back and asked me never to return again, that I was already a married woman. She saw the bruises on my body, but she turned a blind eye to everything. I thought those types of things only happened in movies, but surprisingly, it happened to me too, and I was very surprised. After I was sent away by my stepmom, I didn't have anywhere else to go, so I decided to go back to Dennis' place. He wasn't around when I left, and thankfully he hasn't returned back yet. Then the worst thing happened. What I dreaded the most happened. Can you guys guess what it was? I found out that I was pregnant. I'd taken a pregnancy test after missing my monthly flow, but I never thought I'd really be pregnant. I was pregnant. Yes, guys, I was pregnant. I was so devastated because I couldn't believe I was pregnant with his child. I wasn't happy. It felt like my whole world was crumbling. I didn't know what to do. Worst of all, I didn't have a mother, no father, and no friends. Even if I had friends, he wouldn't allow them to visit. My dad tried visiting several times, but he never allowed him in. Anyone I've told this story today wouldn't believe it. It just sounds easy to leave such a situation. But for a woman like me with no money who was broke, leaving just like that was very hard. Children are gifts from God, so I didn't understand why Dennis was not happy when I told him I was pregnant. He was indifferent about it. I thought he would be happy when I told him I was pregnant, but the reverse was the case. I thought the news of my pregnancy was going to bring us together and he would start training me right. But I was wrong. The only thing he said is I should better hope I'm carrying a baby boy. All through my pregnancy, it was hell. The first trimester was the hardest. The morning sickness was extreme. I was still cleaning the entire house all by myself in that condition. Sometimes Dennis will return back from his business trips with his girlfriends, and he would ask me to cook and serve them. He always told them I was his maid. Some of them asked him to sack me because I was pregnant, that I was good for nothing. Remembering everything is making me tear up right now. I was scared of what would happen when Dennis finds out I'm carrying a girl. I already did an ultrasound, but I was scared. I couldn't tell him. I begged the doctor to keep the gender of the baby from Dennis, and the doctor reluctantly agreed. Denise continued to maltreat me all through the pregnancy. There was never a day he looked at me with love. Soon I found out why he hated me with passion. Apparently, my father cheated him on their business deal. That was why he hated me. He was transferring the hatred he had for my father to me. Maybe it was because I'm the exact replica of my father. I'm not making excuses for him, I'm just trying to understand why he hated me so much. I finally gave birth to my beautiful daughter on a Sunday. I felt joy I've never felt before. I couldn't explain what it was, but I was finally at peace. I felt some form of relief all of a sudden. For the first ever since I lost my mom, I never felt alone again. But I can't say the same for Dennis. He was so disappointed you could see it all over his face. He left me and the baby at the hospital. I spent 3 days at the hospital without anyone coming to see me. When the doctor got tired, he had to discharge me because I was occupying space and the bills were piling up. Honestly, I didn't want to leave the hospital. I was getting food at the hospital. The nurses were helping me with my baby when I was still in the hospital. Now it was just me and my little angel. I found it hard to move around because I had a cesarean section. The doctor and nurses warned me to get enough bed rest and that I shouldn't lift any heavy objects. I couldn't do that because I had no helping hands, which made my recovery journey hard. It took me 6 months to heal completely. That 6 months was hard for me. I had no one to assist me, but I survived it all. My baby and I survived. Dennis one day never addressed Elizabeth as his daughter. He also transferred the hatred he had for me to Elizabeth. But I knew I had to be strong for my daughter's sake. I couldn't cry any longer because Elizabeth would cry whenever he saw me crying. I was tired of everything. I couldn't even buy diapers for my baby. Things were that tough. Dennis refused to put our daughter in school. When Elizabeth was 3 years old, I begged Dennis to at least put her in one of the cheapest schools around, but he said he didn't have any money to spare. This was someone that had a charity organization for less privileged children, but here he was saying he didn't have any money to spare for his daughter's education. At that moment, it felt as if I had failed my daughter. I couldn't believe my daughter might end up like me. If I don't do something, I wished I had little money to use and enroll Elizabeth in school, but I had none. Dennis stopped me from working. One time I got a job at a beauty store and Dennis showed up and made a scene at the store. After that day he warned me never to go work ever again. Dennis always maltreated Elizabeth. He got angry anytime he saw her. Dennis made the house hell for us. We couldn't even breathe well anytime he was around. Fear always gripped us, every time we heard the sound of his car. We always tiptoe around the house cause you never know what you will do and Dennis will get mad. I always dreamt about leaving, but I had nowhere to go. My dad would not accept me because he is scared of what Dennis would do. If my mother was alive, I'm sure she would have damned all consequences and saved me from this abuser. I knew I wouldn't even be in that kind of situation in the first place if my mother was still alive. I'm a mother and I know I can go above and beyond for my child. I might be called a wicked person for saying this, but when Dennis fell sick and was brought home by one of his side chick, I felt relieved. I rushed him to the hospital. After a series of tests, the doctor told me Dennis was down with cancer. Fortunately for him, the cancer was in an early stage and that he needed a bone marrow transplant. I was confused. I didn't understand what he was saying, so he decided to break it down for me. He told me my daughter needed to get tested. If her bone marrow matches with Dennis, then she would have to undergo a surgery to save her father's life. Over my dead body, I shouted, I would never put my child through that pain, not for a worthless man. Dennis doesn't deserve that kind of charity from Elizabeth. He was never a good father to her. How could I let my poor daughter go through a life-changing surgery just to save a man that never considered her as a daughter? Dennis was never a good father to Elizabeth. He doesn't know anything about Elizabeth. Let me shock you guys, Dennis doesn't even know his daughter's name. He always addressed her as A. I couldn't believe what happened to me was happening to my child. We both never experienced the love of a father. I called Dennis' parents and informed them about Dennis' condition. His parents arrived and they were devastated. His parents loved me, but they were scared of Dennis. They couldn't do much for me. Everyone was scared of him, even his own parents. He wasn't a good son, neither was he a good father and husband. He was rude to everyone, even his own parents. He didn't have any iota of respect for them. His mom wanted to visit me when I gave birth, but he refused. He never allowed her to come and assist me. There was a time I reported to his parents that he was maltreating me. His parents called him to advise him. He got angry and ended the call. He stopped sending money to them for a whole year. Truth be told, I was very happy to see Dennis in that condition. If for anything, I was happy he could no longer abuse me anymore. He was helpless. I was happy seeing him fighting for his life. I was having fun with the whole situation. I couldn't believe what was happening. Everything felt like a dream. The same man that used to act like a semi-god is the one lying down helplessly. I didn't feel sorry for him one bit. While Dennis was sick, none of his friends or side chicks showed up at the hospital. I was the only one around taking care of him. It's true what they said, what goes around comes back around. That period was one of the best times of my life. Suddenly it felt as if I had been set free from a cage. I left Dennis at the hospital. I only visited him whenever I wanted. I was living my best life with Dennis' money until one day, I overheard Dennis making arrangements with the doctor so they would take my daughter's bone marrow without my consent. Thank goodness I came to the hospital on that fateful day. I quickly ran out of the hospital as fast as I could and ran home immediately. I took a lot of valuable things I could lay my hands on. I took gold, I took diamonds and lots of money and ran away. Yes, I abandoned my husband on his sick bed. I did it without thinking twice. I relocated with my daughter to Australia. I knew there was no way in the world Dennis would find us, that is, if he survived. Everything was going smoothly for us again, life was beginning to make sense. The first thing I did when we got to Australia was finding a good therapist for my daughter. I didn't want to raise a damaged child. Elizabeth and I had been through a lot. The money I stole from Dennis' safe was more than enough. I made sure my daughter lacked nothing. I gave her the very best. She attended the best school. I was finally able to enroll her in the school. Elizabeth was very intelligent. Everyone loved her. She was too intelligent for her age. Sometimes, I wondered if she was really my daughter. She always made straight A's in class. She was just too smart. I regretted ever marrying Dennis, but I never regretted having Elizabeth. She was the puzzle that was missing in my life. I never felt lonely after I had Elizabeth anymore. If for anything, I became stronger and started fighting to live. Elizabeth was my everything. She was my daughter, best friend, father, mother, husband. She was the best thing that ever happened to me. I think God decided to compensate for my pain. That's why He gave me the best daughter in the whole world. While in Australia, I also started schooling. You know, I never finished college. While my mates were in school learning, I was at home doing chores. I was in college before my dad made me get married to Dennis. Dennis promised my dad I would continue my schooling, but he never fulfilled that promise. He stopped me from schooling immediately after marriage. I went to school and graduated. I studied law in one of the prestigious schools and graduated with good results. I started practicing law professionally and I became one of the best lawyers in town. I never lost any cases. I was living my best life. Life was beginning to make sense again. Elizabeth and I spent 5 years in Australia. Elizabeth was 5 years when we left. Elizabeth never for once asked me about her father's whereabouts. She didn't ask me any questions. For someone that was so inquisitive, she never for once asked me any questions about why we ran away, and I was grateful for that. I never heard anything from Dennis or my father again. I didn't even know whether Dennis survived. Well, I don't care if he survived or not. I continued developing myself and my daughter. I never stopped learning. I kept acquiring more knowledge. I built myself with every resource I could lay my hands on. I was preparing myself for the war ahead. I knew we would one day go back to the States. I will have to go back and divorce Dennis so I could finally be free. Dennis and I were still married. According to the documents he made me sign, I couldn't divorce him or else I'd have to pay a hefty sum. I'm not sure those documents were even illegal, but lack of confidence never made me do the right thing. So guys, I was still married to him. So I had all the right to come claim his entire assets. Before running away, I put everything in place. I took all the important documents I could lay my hands on before running away. Leaving Dennis on the sick bed and running away with our daughter was one of the best decisions I have ever made. It gave me the opportunity to build myself. It gave me enough time to grow, enough time to fix my broken self-esteem. I was no longer the little puppet he played with it. I had become strong and independent. I was doing well for myself. While in Australia, I was just waiting for the perfect opportunity to return back to the States. I wanted to make a grand entrance. One day, while we were listening to the news, I was busy with my phone scrolling through social media when I got a text from one of my friends. She told me she got to know that Dennis survived cancer after his brother gave him his bone marrow. Anyways, it didn't matter whether he survived or not. What mattered to me was how to take everything for him. I was just waiting for the perfect opportunity. I called Elizabeth and told her to prepare that we would have to return back. She was not happy about that. She begged for us to stay there, but I told her we needed to go back to her. She needed to take over her father's property. She told me she doesn't need any of that, but I knew she didn't understand what I was saying. She was still a baby. She was just 10 years old then. I knew one day, when she is a lot older, she will thank me for that decision. I'm just doing everything possible to position her in the right place. One thing I vowed to myself was that my daughter would not go through everything I went through. I promised myself I would make her strong and independent, and that no man will ever be able to treat her the way Dennis treated me. One of the reasons Elizabeth didn't want us to leave was because she was scared. She knew how life was for us back then and how it is now. She also didn't want to lose her friends, but I assured her we would return after we secured her future. Finally, we got back to the States. Coming back to the States brought back old memories. All of a sudden, everything came flashing back at me. This very place felt uncomfortable for me. I started having a double mind. I wanted to go back to Australia. Old fears were coming back, but looking at my daughter, I had to be strong. I had to fight for my daughter's future. I didn't want to be a total failure like my dad. I refused to be a weakling. I decided to face my fears. Elizabeth and I lodged in a hotel, and I was just waiting for the right opportunity to announce my presence to Dennis. Soon the right opportunity came. The UN was hosting a ball in honor of Dennis for his humanitarian service to the less privileged. That was the perfect opportunity one had, and I took it. What do you guys think happened next? Hi guys, it's me again. So the ball was strictly by invitation, and I didn't have an invite. But I was allowed in after I told them Dennis I was a beneficiary of Dennis humanitarian service. The ball was big, all his acquaintances were present. I took a seat and sat down quietly waiting for my time. Seeing Dennis smiling from ear to ear made me furious. Here he was, my abuser, pretending and acting like a saint. When Dennis spotted me, he got scared and pulled me to the side so he could ask what I was doing there. He was very shocked to see me. I couldn't believe that I'd fallen for his tricks before and that I let myself get confused by the games he tried to play. I made myself believe so many lies. How could I think there was a document that could make me never ask for divorce? I just didn't have the courage to look for a proper lawyer to help me out in court. Now that I'm a lawyer, I know better. That's the only reason why he could trample all over me and act like he was high and mighty. I disgraced Dennis on a night he was supposed to be honored, and I don't regret it one bit. He didn't expect to see me at all, and he made sure to make that clear. He accused me of leaving him when he was in his toughest moments, only for me to come back just so I could take revenge. I didn't even need to talk before he understood why I was present. He was threatened by my presence, and it was obvious. Dennis and I spent a lot of time arguing and having a lot of back and forths. He wasn't ready to back down, and so was I. I had to tell him how much I hated him before I spat on the floor and left him standing there. I still get goosebumps anytime I think about what happened because it was hard for me to go through all that alone. Standing up to someone who hurt you before is really hard, and it takes a lot of courage to do that. I knew that the first step I had to take was to get out of the marriage. I was still legally married to him, and I didn't want it to stay that way, so I made the conscious decision to get out of the narrative without incurring any legal problems. I knew that what my father and I had been scared of before was just stupid threats. We were just poor, and that's why we didn't have the common sense to know that Dennis had just been trying to use our head. He just wanted to play mind games with us, and we fell for it. I still can't believe that there was a time in my life when I thought that I couldn't get a divorce if I wanted to. It took a much-needed break and becoming a lawyer for me to understand just how easy it was to get a divorce if I really wanted one. Ignorance can be bliss sometimes, but it takes courage to be smart. As a lawyer, I did a lot of research and knew I could divorce Dennis without paying a dime. I can even sue him for making me sign a paper under duress. The reason Dennis is scared of divorce is because he doesn't want me to get half of his property. That was why he forced me to sign a paper. Well, I'm back now, this time a lot smarter and bolder, and I'm ready to divorce him and take half of his money. I served Dennis the divorce papers. He was shocked. He reminded me of the paper he made me sign years ago, and I told him I could sue him for making me sign a document under duress. I told him it was illegal. I gave him two options: either he signed the divorce papers, or I sued him to court for making me sign a document under duress, and he might end up spending 5 years in prison. Dennis got scared. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. I guess the thought of him losing half of his property to me humbled him. Immediately, he fell on his knees and asked me to forgive him for everything he has ever done. He asked me to give our marriage a second chance. He said he was ready to be a good husband and most importantly a good father. I was too smart to fall for that crocodile tears. The 20-year-old me would have fallen for his tricks, but I'm a lot smarter now. I know what he is doing. I'm very familiar with that act. It's been 5 years ever since I left Dennis, and he hasn't changed a bit. He was still as cunning and manipulative as ever. When he saw my mind was made up, he took his car keys and walked out. You guys would not believe what happened next. Dennis returned back and continued pleading, this time around with my dad. Dennis brought my dad to plead with him. I couldn't even believe my eyes, how my dad fell for his manipulation. I haven't seen my dad ever since I left for Australia 5 years ago. I couldn't understand why he decided to appear before me just like that, asking me to forgive a man that almost ruined my life. It was at that point I realized anyone can be a father, but it takes a real man to be a dad. People like Dennis and my dad have one thing in common: they were never a good father to their children. Anyways, I turned him down too. Dennis was trying to change my mind by all means possible. He went as far as getting me a new car, but I refused to be swayed by his antics. He started coming back home early. He even started taking Elizabeth out for ice cream. My innocent daughter was happy. She thought her father was beginning to love her. I knew he had not changed and was only pretending. He was only trying to change my mind. Dennis tried his best to change my mind, but when he saw my mind was made up, he decided to sign the divorce papers. He was scared of going to jail, I guess. I couldn't believe it was finally happening. The moment I have been waiting for is here. Dennis has finally signed the divorce papers, and I'm about to be free. It felt like a heavy burden had been lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in a while, I felt freedom. Hi guys, it's me again. I didn't know how tough divorce proceedings can be. The whole thing was exhausting. The entire divorce process was hectic. Dennis tried to buy the jury over, but he failed. I knew Dennis would not back down easily. Dennis employed the services of 3 senior lawyers. He told me I was not going to get a penny from him. He was so confident that he would win against me. Well, I was a bit scared too. Who wouldn't after seeing the lawyers he employed? I was able to calm myself down and just trust the system. His lawyers tried all they could to make sure I didn't get a penny, but I'm glad justice prevailed at last. Dennis and I finally got divorced, and I got half of his property. That is, I got half of everything he owned. You guys needed to have seen him that day. He cried hot tears. I'm not exaggerating, guys. He cried like a baby that lost his candy. I also got custody of our daughter. Dennis was also asked to start paying for child support. Dennis was fighting for the custody of our daughter because he didn't want to pay for child support. After the divorce, I decided to go start all over again in another city. I relocated permanently to Chicago with Elizabeth. I sold all the houses and assets I got from Dennis. I didn't want anything that would remind me of my bitter past. I invested for my daughter's future. Dennis was still paying the child support every month, but you never can't tell what might happen tomorrow. Dennis is unpredictable. I got a job in a law firm and I became a licensed lawyer in America. Life was beginning to make sense again. I decided to further my education while working too. I kept developing myself. I made sure I gave Elizabeth the best. She attended the best school and always came out top of her class. Sometimes, I wondered what I ever did right to deserve such a beautiful and intelligent daughter. Dennis never for once visited us in Chicago. He never even asked Elizabeth, but always sent money every month. I guessed he never forgave me for taking half of his money. He went around spreading false rumors about me. He told anyone that cared to listen how I abandoned him on his bed and ran away with our daughter, and how I came back again to divorce him and take half of his money. Truth be told, initially it affected me because people judged me without hearing my own side of the story. I was hurt, I wouldn't even lie. That was even one of the reasons I relocated from Los Angeles to Chicago. Dennis was hell-bent on destroying my name. As time went on, I no longer cared about what Dennis and his gossip mongers had to say about me. I ignored them, and soon enough, they got tired and frustrated. As for my dad, my stepmom kept pushing him into debt. I heard my stepsister Alora got married to an old rich man. I'm not surprised though, knowing how greedy my stepmom is. I knew she can sell off her own daughter too, just like she did with me. She is one of the most selfish beings I know. I don't even know how she sleeps at night. I mean, I'm a mother and I don't see myself doing that to my child. My dad finally got tired of her flamboyant lifestyle and sent her away. I wished he did that earlier. I wouldn't have married Dennis in the first place. But I believe everything happens for a reason. If I had not married Dennis, I wouldn't have had my daughter Elizabeth. Elizabeth is my will to live. She is my best friend and everything. I work so hard because of her. I want her to know what it means to be a strong, independent, and hard-working woman. Elizabeth finally graduated from high school. It was a proud moment for me. She dedicated her speech to me. She described me as her superhero. Dennis got married again, this time not to a naive 20-year-old girl, but to a businesswoman like him. She divorced him 3 months later. Is not everyone that could put up with what I endured in the hands of Dennis. That is my story, guys. Now I understand the saying that you never know how strong you are until being strong is the only way. Nothing prepared me for everything life threw at me, but I'm grateful for everything. The hardship I went through made me stronger, and I'm grateful I survived it all. Thanks, and